Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Yesterday, unbeaten up-and-comer from right here in the US of A, OShae Jones was in action opposite the ring, Samantha Pill, in what was OShae Jones's fourth fight of this year. She's had a very productive year, and this is the kind of schedule you want for an unbeaten up-and-comer like OShae Jones, a talented one who comes from a great amateur background and exhibits a lot of virtues as a professional, campaigning at or around welterweight. Welterweight, that's 147 pounds. That's where Sandy Ryan's got the WBO, Jessica McCaskill's got the WBC and the WBA, and where Natasha Jonas has the IBF and is set to defend it against Michaela Mayer. OShae Jones sports a professional record of 5 wins with no losses, no draws, 1 recorded knockout. She racked up her first yesterday, and I like what I see.
There's a lot of movement at or around 147 pounds. When you see an unbeaten up-and-comer from the United States like OShae Jones, an unbeaten up-and-comer, a strong puncher like Dee Allen from the United Kingdom, it tells the story of a division that is set to heat up within the next 1 to 2 years.
And if an amateur standout, a former Olympian like OShae Jones is flying a bit low on the radar, isn't talked about as much as she should be, it could be because she's not with a major promotional outfit. She's not with a Top Rank, not with a Matchroom, not with a Golden Boy, though the talent is there. And when the time comes, somebody's going to have to deal with her, whether it's at 147, 154, and possibly 160, given OShae Jones's physical dimensions.
She's got generous physical dimensions for a welterweight, for a 147 pounder, to where she could easily move up to 154 and 160. 25 years old.
Plenty of good years to give to the sport, and the kind of fighter that ways nobody's gonna voluntarily take her on. She's a high risk, low reward at this point in the juncture. So what she's gotta do is stay busy, stay active, climb up those ranks, and put one of those champions at 147 or 154 in a position to where they have no choice. They have to fight her. OShae Jones has to do what she's got to do, just like Dee Allen, to become somebody's mandatory challenger, because she's not the kind of fighter you fight willingly.
While she's not with a major promotional outfit, she is managed by split team management, who know a thing or two about promoting female fighters and getting them the titles. The very capable Brian Cohen.
I very much like what I see in OShae Jones, who could fast develop into a near, apparent, and credible threat to any of the world champions at 147, 154, and maybe even one day 160, because she's got time, she's got youth, she's got the amateur pedigree, the talent, and the power.
And she's a Capricorn, too. Don't forget the Capricorns. They make very good boxers. Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman,
Floyd Patterson, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr., Felix Trinidad, Josh Taylor, Alexander Usyk,
Delphine Passoon, OShae Jones.
Capricorns tend to make good fighters. They tend to make good boxers, and it just so happens that OShae Jones is Team Capricorn. I like what I see in this fighter, and I'm going to be paying close attention to her movements moving forward, because I see a potential champion, and not just a champion, perhaps a unified champion, a multi-weight champion. OShae Jones has the ingredients.
Congratulations to her for racking up another professional victory and what is her first recorded knockout.
In men's super lightweight news, WBO champion Teofimo Lopez had an ominous forecast for the future of DAZN in the sport of boxing, and he tagged Eddie Hearn saying, like I said, no more than 5 years. It's going to happen whether you sterling silver spoon-fed schmucks like it or not. He predicts that DAZN boxing may go the same way as Showtime and HBO boxing.
What's he got against Eddie Hearn and DAZN?
Don't you remember? He thinks they set him up. He thinks they set it up for George Kambosos to beat him the way that he did, and I'm not quite sure how the logistics of that work out, but to those comments, Eddie Hearn responded by saying, I talk about the commercial value of a fighter. You're talking about a guy who boxed once in 2021, twice in 2022, and once this year, all because he has unrealistic expectations of his commercial value.
Teofimo's never going to admit that, but Eddie Hearn hit the nail on the head. It was unrealistic expectations of his commercial value that led him to lose as much time on the George Kambosos fight as he did. Top Rank wanted to do it at a certain price based on what was going on at the time. Teofimo didn't like that. He wanted more money. He spent a year pursuing it because there's a year in between the Lomachenko fight and the Kambosos fight, and it blew up in Teofimo's face.
He's never going to admit that, but it did. He'd rather go off on tangents and conspiracy theories about how Matchroom and Eddie Hearn set him up when the real reason he lost is he outgrew the weight. In the time it took him to finally get George in the ring at a price that he liked, by that time, making lightweight grew too difficult and he was ill. He was under the weather. He was sick. Those circumstances are of his own making.
You were never supposed to lose that amount of time on a fight like that because that was not a big fight. That was not a hot ticket, but you wanted hot ticket money, and it costed you.
Nevertheless, Teofimo feels that DAZN boxing may go the same way as Showtime boxing and HBO boxing in 5 years' time. On a timeline like that, you never know what could happen. A lot could happen within the next 5 years in the sport of boxing, as we are in a transitional phase, not just when it comes to the sport of boxing, but how consumers consume media.
Content.
Teofimo's ominous forecast doesn't address the nuances in between how DAZN operates and how Showtime operated when it comes to their boxing content. Showtime, for the most part, was a domestic premium cable network, whereas DAZN is a global streaming platform available in far more markets than Showtime, and their strategy is a lot different. Showtime had a lot of their content behind a paywall, an $80 paywall where you're paying $80 roughly 6 to 7 times a year just to watch a halfway decent fight, whereas DAZN doesn't put on anywhere near as many pay-per-views. I don't feel like Teofimo's forecast addresses these differences. Moreover, he's not addressing the inflated purse demands from the fighters and how that also affects the market, the American market mostly, because this is a uniquely American problem. The UK boxing scene is bigger than it's ever been, and the Asian one. Even the Australian market is booming. It's here in America where the audience is dwindling.
Sparsely active fighters with inflated egos who have inflated purse demands, that's a part of it.
You'd think it doesn't matter that Teofimo has only fought once this year. While he is coming off a career best win over Josh Taylor, he didn't build on that momentum by fighting again. You'd think that doesn't matter. Fighters and managers who don't want to go backwards on the money, and as a result, their schedules suffer for it, and people do start to forget. So when they come back and it's time to fight, they feel entitled to numbers that don't reflect their actual market value and what they're worth and what their fights are worth and what they're going to generate. There's a lot that can be said when it comes to that in and of itself and how it's affecting the American boxing landscape. Teofimo wants to point the finger away.
Yeah, everything is someone else's fault.
There is a lot to unpack when it comes to this exchange, but the gist of it is, fighters wanting too much money? Yeah, that's a problem too. In men's welterweight news, the world is still reacting to the IBF's decision to strip Terence Crawford of the title and award it to Jarron Ennis on the predication that Terence isn't about to fight him. Terence has to run it back with Errol Spence Jr., who has a contractual right to a rematch, which he has so exercised. As a result of that, Terence is unable to fight Jarron Ennis or anybody else until he sorts that out.
Some are actually suggesting that Terence Crawford is avoiding Jarron Ennis when it looks to me like it was never Jarron Ennis's intention to get him in the ring.
It wasn't. You will recall that in previous videos I highlighted how, even though Jarron Ennis had a cushy spot by way of the WBO, as recent as December of last year, late last year, he was fighting in IBF eliminators, not WBO eliminators. Terence Crawford at that time was WBO champion, not IBF champion.
Errol had the IBF, and Team Ennis couldn't have thought they were going to get Errol in the ring while they're doing interviews talking about how they want Crawford.
You're fighting in eliminators that would line you up for Errol Spence Jr., not Terence Crawford. And I remember late last year, in December, Jarron Ennis was ranked at number 2, ranked only behind Virgil Ortiz, who was ranked at number 1 at that time. And at that time, we already knew that Virgil's not actually on the WBO route. He was supposed to be fighting a Montestanionis via the WBA, which means that if Jarron Ennis really wanted a Crawford fight, he he would have stayed the course.
He was ranked at number 2 by way of the WBO.
Jarron Ennis and his team decided to stay on the IBF route instead, which didn't line them up for Terence Crawford, as Terence was an IBF champion at the time.
I'm telling you that no matter what these guys said in interviews, they were not after a Terence Crawford fight, and the evidence is there, because not only was this guy ranked at number 2 by way of the WBO, which would have lined him up for Terence Crawford,
they're the ones that decided to go another route, even after the people at Black Prime reached out to them, inquiring about doing a fight between Jarron Ennis and Terence Crawford. They're the ones who decided to go another route.
Did you forget what Bozy Ennis said on the Stamina for Sale podcast earlier this year? Bozy Ennis, Jarron Ennis' father and trainer. Did you forget?
Boots and that they reached out. Were those talks ever really tangible?
I saw some stuff about people talking about, some discussions with BLK Prime.
You know what I mean? We was trying to set up a fight with him last month because BLK people called us.
I wouldn't characterize that as discussion. There was a discussion.
I said, yeah, we'll take him in a heartbeat, just like that, right? And they said, all right, let's sit down and talk. I said, oh, you got to talk to my people first, though. Showtime.
Yes, sir. But the reality is, they don't have a deal with Crawford.
I never signed nothing with Showtime.
If Crawford's under contract to BLK Prime, then maybe it goes through that. But the reality is,
with no signing, no contract.
They're trying to put together a fight just like we're trying to put together a fight. So the reality is it was a very short conversation. They didn't really bring much to the table in terms of helping make the deal. So there really was no point in following up on that.
See, I'm loyal to Showtime because I'm going to tell y'all.
If there's going to be a Boots and a fight between Boots and Crawford, there are easier ways to do it without going through them.
See, I'm loyal to Showtime because I'm going to tell y'all, I never signed nothing with Showtime. They fair with me, I'm fair with them. With no signing, no contract.
That soundbite is from earlier this year in February. Bozy Ennis himself admitted on the Stamina for Sale podcast that after Crawford's fight with David Evanesian late last year, the people at Black Prime reached out to them about doing a fight with Terence. And Bozy was insistent that Showtime had to be involved, even though he doesn't have a contract with Showtime. That is, his son doesn't. So if you're not contractually obligated to box on Showtime, why would you let them get in the way of a potential fight with Crawford? I thought you wanted Crawford. I thought that's the fight you were after. At least that's what your son likes to tell interviewers and people in the media, but when push came to shove,
you hid behind networks.
What are you trying to convince me of? That you guys wanted Terence so bad, you let a network that you're not even contracted to get in the way of a fight with him? That you were trying to dictate what network distributes the fight to the champion?
You're trying to dictate terms to Terence.
You, who aren't even exclusively contracted to Showtime, are gonna tell him that Showtime has to be involved, and Showtime has to be the one that does it. My question is, did Showtime actually make a counter-offer to do the fight themselves? Remember, at this time, the Spence fight wasn't made. Terence Crawford, he didn't have anything to do.
If you and your father, who are so fucking loyal to Showtime who are now out of boxing, right?
Right.
You're so loyal to them, did you go to them and tell them to make Terence a counter-offer so you can do the fight on the Showtime side of things?
You know you didn't. What you did do is move ahead with a Roman Villa fight, because it was never actually your intention to get Terence Crawford in the ring. The look of it is it looks like you were going after the IBF title, knowing you wouldn't get the IBF champion, knowing you're not actually going to get Errol Spence Jr. You're just lining yourself up for his belt should the day come that he vacates it. Because all this time, what you really wanted was a vacant title, not a title fight.
You didn't want Terence. You walked away from Terence more than once, and you didn't actually think you were going to get Errol. You thought you'd get his discarded belt.
Those who are now celebrating Jarron Ennis being elevated to full IBF champion seem to favor unproven and unworthy fighters over legitimate champions. A legitimate champion like Terrence Crawford, who beat a champion for every belt that he's won as a welterweight. He took the WBO from Jeff Hearn years ago. He took the other 3 belts off Errol Spence Jr. earlier this year. And for that...
You're happy the IBF stripped him?
No, I'm not as enamored with Jarron Boots Ennis as some others, watching him pounce on what are overmatched opponents and regaling him as the best thing since sliced bread. For it seems to me that you maneuvered quite carefully while trying to convince the world that you were after Terrence Crawford.
Actions speak louder than words, and when you had the opportunity to take action and take that fight, you didn't. You didn't even try. It was never really your intention to get a Crawford fight.
This cult following that Jarron Ennis has, these bandwagon jumpers, those who were pouring all their support into Errol Spence Jr., now pouring that same support into Jarron Ennis, only do so because they think of him as being a Heyman fighter when he actually isn't. They think of him as being one of Heyman's boys. I don't know if he will be in the future. I just know that he hasn't been so far, for the simple fact of where he fights. What platform was airing his fights? The Showtime platform that is now out of boxing.
You know, the ones you were so fucking loyal to, you actually let that get in the way of a Crawford fight.
The ones who are now out of boxing beyond this year. Now, why would Jarron and Bozy Ennis be so loyal to Showtime if they didn't actually have a contract with them? And rumor has it is that they were receiving inflated purses, that even if they didn't have a contractual incentive or a contractual obligation to box on the Showtime platform, they were receiving a cash incentive, receiving well in excess of their marquee value in terms of fight purses to pledge fealty to the platform.
Why a cash incentive?
You mean, why didn't Showtime sign Jarron Ennis to an exclusivity deal if they were so invested in him? It's because if you put that on paper, if you put it in writing, you're on the hook for a hefty contract minimum. Whereas by giving him cash incentives,
you have more flexibility.
When you see a fighter like a Shakur Stevenson making in the neighborhood of $3 million, that's as a result of his contract minimum. That's a very big purse for a fight like that. But Top Rank is on the hook to pay him that because that's his contract minimum. For loyalty to the Top Rank banner and the ESPN platform,
he gets a big cash guarantee because, in essence, that's what Top Rank is paying for. They're paying for his loyalty and his exclusivity, and they have it in writing. Whereas with Jarron Ennis and Showtime, it wasn't in writing.
Bozy Ennis said it himself. They didn't have a contract with Showtime, they just liked the way they were being treated there. And the way they were being treated there, they were given inflated purses to stay exclusive to the platform, even if it wasn't in writing. Though at the site, the opportunity of boxing Terrence Crawford off-platform...
Well, if you really wanted him, you would have went over there to get him because you had the liberty to do so.
No, I don't believe that the Jarron Ennis team had any intention of actually facing Terrence Crawford in spite of what they might say to the media when the cameras are rolling. Their actions speak much louder than their words do, and ultimately, you've got a belt. Congratulations. You can get Jarron Ennis a belt, but a belt by itself won't get him marquee value, won't make him popular, and that's what he really needs more than anything. Now you're at welterweight, you're an IBF champion, but you have no signature fights, and there don't look to be any on the horizon, so we'll see what the future holds for Jarron Ennis. As far as the Crawford stuff, you never wanted to fight Crawford.